Hello everyone, this is Ranger J 1999 from the Reality Scoot Gamers, so welcome to another lore video. This is a lore video series that we're doing on new characters, or maybe characters you've never heard of, from the lore and such that might be in the game that we currently stream a lot about, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. So sometimes these will be characters that are in the game, and sometimes these will be characters maybe we want to see in the game. And this is for the beginner point of view. Maybe you've never heard of these characters, or maybe you want to learn more about these characters, and this is what this lore series is about. Now, for some of these characters, they will be canon, some will be expanded universe or legends, and sometimes both, but it depends on the character, and we'll get into that more in a second. As a quick side note, these videos are done with more of a podcast feel. This is just me talking to you like we're having a conversation. And also, any images that you see that are being used here, if you, the content creator, have an issue with us using these images, please let us know, and we'll take action to correct it. And of course, I'm a human being. If I make any mistake, then please let me know in the comments. Constructive criticism is always appreciated. So if you have anything you want to say, make sure it's constructive. We always like feedback, maybe something we can do better, what you like, what you don't like. It's always welcome. But if you're going to go the opposite way, then I'll just delete your message, and we will move on from there. So that being said, let's get into the character that we are covering today. And today we'll be talking about one of my favorite characters, Darth Bane. Now, Darth Bane is not currently in the game Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, but he is one of the most famous characters in the Star Wars mythos, and I've had a lot of people request that I cover Darth Bane. So we'll get into that. So there's, for those who do not know who Darth Bane, he is the progenitor of the rule of two of the Sith, where there will only ever be two Sith. A master who has the power, and an apprentice who craves it and wants the power. So it creates that dynamic, and we'll get into why this is the case. But this is important because for millennia, throughout the history of Star Wars, the reason the Sith were not as successful as they were was because a lot of time with the dark side, it would cause infighting and backstabbing, lust for power. The Sith would actually do more damage to themselves betraying one another than they ever would with the enemy. And this is what led Darth Bane to start his new philosophy, and what kind of led him down the path that he had seen before, and what he learns over his time as a Sith and elsewhere. And because of what he creates with the rule of two, the Sith kind of, with this mindset, stay in the shadows and do what they do for over 1,000 years, and this kind of culminates into Palpatine, who then is able to fulfill the dream of the Sith of taking over the galaxy. He is the culmination of all their teachings and passing down of knowledge for over 1,000 years, and it comes back to coming to their favor as he's able to destroy the Jedi and rule the galaxy. So there was a method to the madness. Now, Darth Bane is unusual in that when I usually cover these, it's either mainly canon, I'll bring in some lore stuff, or it's just all expanded universe legend stuff. For Bane, it's a little different, because Bane is canon, but he's barely canon. So I'm going to cover what is canon for Bane, and then we're going to get into his legend stuff, because it's just so great from the novel series and the comics, things of that nature that's about Bane, and it's just too good not to cover. So we'll cover what's official, and then we'll cover what's not, that's the all legend stuff. So let's get into it. So first, let's describe and kind of get an idea of what Darth Bane looked like. You can kind of see from the picture. Darth Bane was a human male who stood approximately 6'5", or 2 meters roughly. He was always depicted as bald. I didn't really find any other images of him with hair. And you can see his skin color was a certain kind of tannish, little bit of yellow tint to it, very brownish skin. So you can kind of see that there in the image. Typically his eyes were initially blue, but then they would turn to yellow and black and be permanent that way, of course, from being a dark side user. So officially for canon, he is mentioned as the start of the rule of two, and not much is told other than he was killed by one of his students. Nothing official. The other thing that was official, that his body was, after his death, his body was placed in a sarcophagus in the Valley of the Dark Lords on Morban or Korban, whichever way you want to go with the pronunciation of the Sith world. Some still say Morban, some say Korban. I know there's official what it's supposed to be called, but a lot of us refer to it as Korban, some refer to Morban. So if I say either or, you know what I'm talking about. Now, he didn't really become official canon until, of all things, the Clone Wars TV saga on Disney. With the Clone Wars, when Disney took over, they made Clone Wars official canon, and in the last season, before we get this new season coming up, Master Yoda had gone on this journey to learn the secrets of immortality, and it led him to Morban. And he enters there as part of his journey, the tomb of Darth Bane, and he confronts the spirit of the Dark Lord. So he has this conversation with Darth Bane, who tries to tempt him, and Yoda refuses, dismissing him. And basically, after their talk and confrontation, the spirit goes back into the sarcophagus, and Yoda continues on his journey. If you haven't seen that episode, you should. It's really good. But during that encounter, he does refer to him as Darth Bane, as the creator of Rule of Two, and that's where we get the official naming of the Rule of Two and what it would become. And it became official canon at that point. And a cool little side note for you guys out there that don't know, the voice of Darth Bane in that scene was done by none other than Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill. And you can go read about that and learn about that if you want, but I thought that was pretty cool that Luke Skywalker was the voice of Darth Bane in the show. So, but that's really the official canon version of Bane. Not a lot is said. They said he's just the creator of the world too. Was killed by his apprentice where he was buried. Yoda has a confrontation with him. That's it. Now that's all the canon side. Now, if we want to get in more depth, now we get to the legend side. So this will kind of tie into a little bit of the canon, what we know, but this is not official canon. This is the expanded universe legend side, and these come from the books and comics and things of that name. So really, Darth Bane was actually born in 1026, and he died in the year 980 BBY. So he was 56 years old. His original name, he did have an original name, was Dessel, and he was raised on the planet Apatros, which was a mining planet, and he was born to a very abusive father who was a miner on that planet, and his father's name was Hurst. And he had a nickname. He went from his name Dessel, that most people called him Des. And he was picked on and bullied by others, and he was excessively picked on, bullied, and beaten by his father. And his father was a drunkard, and the reason his father had such animosity towards him is because his wife had died giving birth to him, and his father considered him to be the bane of his existence. Get it there? And he started calling him Bane. So Bane started getting that into his head. But he was on this planet, he was known as Des. So on this planet, we continue on. You know, Des eventually grows up. In 101 BBY, when he's 16 years old, he starts to work in the mines, and he continues to get threats and bullying, but he ignores it, and he starts to develop into a very, as you can tell, he's very tall, 6'5". He starts very tall and muscular young man. I mean, working the mines does that for you. And unbeknownst to anyone is that he was also force sensitive, so he's often getting messages in the force, and he could also often feel the pull of the force to him, and he also felt the pull of the dark side especially. He's starting to feel all this anger and animosity for all these people that were just giving him a hard time and constantly picking on him. So this continues on. He continues to work in the mine. We get to 2 years later in 99 BBY, where one day his father, who gets really, really pissed drunk, really started laying into him. And this time, Des stands up to him, and they have a confrontation. And his father basically beats him to the point that he actually cracks his ribs. He beats the crap out of him. But Bane doesn't say anything. He doesn't make a sound. He just goes his own way after getting the crap kicked out of him. But he's filled with this just unimaginable amount of hate, and he just thinks and wishes that his father would die, and he envisions his father dying, and he sees his vision of the force of a hand squeezing his heart, and then he passes out and doesn't think anything of it. So the next morning, his father's found dead, and unknown to Bane at the time, he was the cause. And so everyone just thought that his heart had stopped and he had just died from old age. But no one knew that it was because Bane had used the Force to stop his heart with the vision of the dark side that he had had. And Bane didn't realize this yet. We'll get back to that here later on. Now, after his father's death, the folks still try to pick on him and stuff, but it's not working. He's bigger, he's stronger, and he's able to basically fight back. He stands up for himself, and he basically is so strong now and more confident that he basically fights them enough and wins that they leave him alone and they don't bother him anymore. And he continues on his way. He continues working there, and he'd become quite a good card player and gambler, and he would frequently the cantinas in the area. At the time, there was a war going on between the Galactic Republic and the Brotherhood of the Sith. So it was the Jedi and the Sith, and another war of many wars that they would have over the centuries and times and millennia. And he basically would play cards against people, and he'd usually take their money using the Force and stuff. He didn't really realize he was doing it, but he was an exceptional card player. So a bunch of these Galactic Republic soldiers come in. He basically... an ensign, a couple other soldiers, he plays them on cards, he beats them, he especially beats the ensign. He gets an unbelievable hand in Sabak, and for like 10,000 credits, I believe. So they have this confrontation almost at the card table, but they stop themselves and they wait for him outside. When he gets done with that, he's got his winnings, he's going home. He's attacked by the two of the soldiers and the ensign. And they end up getting into a fight. Bane was able to hold himself off. One brings out a vibroblade, and unfortunately, Bane senses that he stops the blade and ends up killing the ensign. And the other two soldiers are scared out of their minds. They run off and they go to report that he's killed an ensign. Now that means Des needs to get the hell out of Dodge, and he uses what he's earned in his winnings to basically go off planet, and at this time he decides that he's going to join the ranks of the Sith, the Brotherhood of Darkness, and this is going to play a big part of his story, and we're going to get into it. Now, Bane travels to where the Sith are, and he joins the Brotherhood of Darkness, and he joins an assistant infantry grunt, and he joins a unit there of infantry people specialists that are called the Gloomstalkers. And, of course, being a dark side user, being strong in the Force, not really aware that he's that strong in the Force, but he's got a connection to it. He uses his prominence in battle to be a beacon of leadership for the Gloomstalkers, more so than their commander, who, when it came down to it, the Gloomstalkers looked at Bane as more of their leader than the damn commander was. And he rose through the ranks quickly, became a sergeant, and he would lead them to victory after victory after victory, and he really gained the trust of all the men and women that followed him. Now, this all happened, they had victory after victory, but then things changed when they were ordered, they were in a battle to go do something that just was tactically just stupid, and Bane could see it. However, the commander would not defy the Sith Lord, and him and Bane argue about it. Bane's like, okay, we're not doing it this way. The commander wanted to follow the orders to a T, and Bane basically is like, okay, does a mutiny, knocks the crap out of the commander, takes over, and he leads the Gloomstalkers into the battle, because they still have to do it, but he defies the orders and he does it his way. He ends up during the battle leading to victory, but he gets blind, and then his connection to the Force is so strong that he's able to pick off the snipers and other people shooting him, and he leads the Gloomstalkers to victory. Of course, when he gets back, he's told by the commander that he's been reported and he's expecting to be court-martialed. However, that's not quite what happens. The Sith, by the name of Kopecz, Kopecz, there's a lot of these names that's hard to pronounce, but it's like Kopecz, he was so impressed by Bane, and he sensed the just incredible amount of the Force that he had, especially the dark side. He's like, not only did you do a good job, I think you need to come to Sith Academy on Korriban and be trained, or Morban. Remember, you can say whatever you want. And Bane was like, yeah, I accept. And he took him to the Sith Academy, where he began his training as a Sith. And from this point on, he never referred himself to Dress again. I'm sorry, not Des. Sorry, not Dress, Des. And he would start calling himself Bane. So when he got there, he arrived and he just got into his studies. He started to focus more on learning, so he began studying under two lords, his main lord, which was Quartus, and his kind of lightsaber, the battle master of lightsaber combat, Kasim. And what Bane did, unlike a lot of the other students, is he just his life existed in the archives. He was just scooping up so much knowledge. He craved knowledge so much, studying all the history of the Sith, the ancient teachings, the writings, whatever he was to get his hands on. Of course, everybody looked at him like, you're wasting your time. Those are just relics from a bygone era. You should be focusing on other things. And he refuses. He's like, okay, you can mock me all you want, but there's stuff here and I need to know it. He eventually has a heart-to-heart meeting with his master, and he tells him, look, you need to start focusing not so much on that, but more on the physical and mental training side of the Force. And Bane agrees. And so he starts his focus on studying more, honing in his physical prowess with the lightsaber, his mental training, and that's what he starts to focus on instead. So he does this for several months. And during training, he rose to the ranks of all the students and became one of the top students. And he challenged one of the students, Foharg, Foharkh, who had beaten him before. And this time, Foharg beat him, but started taunting him. And this brought back, images. He'd been taunted and bullied before, and this is what he was doing. And it unleashed a just raw dark side energy explosion from him that basically killed Foharg. Now he thought he was going to be punished again, but again his riddle gets turned upside down, where Quartus is like, that's pretty impressive, and actually told Kassim that he needed to pay more attention to him because he could sense the power in Bane. So again, Bane expected to be punished for his actions, and it turned out differently. There was repercussions, though, from this, of him killing this student. At this time, Bane realizes that he had just killed someone, and that he had done the same kind of thing in the past, and that he was the one that killed his father by embracing the dark side, and the dark side acquiescing to his will to do what it wanted. And this started to create doubt in Bane. And he started to doubt himself, and he also started doubting the teachings of his masters, of the Brotherhood, and it also started him to start losing connection to the dark side. He then went back again to the lore because he's trying to figure out what the hell to do now. So he's just aggressively trying to find something. He's getting mocked again, but he wanted something to bolster his belief in what he was being taught by the Sith, and he couldn't find anything. And one of the things that he started questioning was why the Brotherhood was acting the way that it did. One of them being that none of them called themselves Darth. The Darth title was not to be used. The Brotherhood had basically outlawed that because they feared that if they would start the infighting that had previously happened with the Sith. And Bane looked at this as weakness, that it started creeping doubt in him, that started seeing the Brotherhood is flawed, and that they were not worthy of being Sith, that they were just pretenders to the crown. During this time, a Jedi deserter, and this is somebody that would be important in his life, Githani, arrives, and her and Bane have an immediate connection, and they basically start working together. She had gone there to join the Sith, and they each were basically, even though they had a connection and there was an attraction there, they used each other. So Bane saw her as a tool to be used, and she saw the same thing. So they started getting stuff from one another. Good old Sith. And she started secretly teaching him Force techniques that he wasn't learning from anybody else. At the same time, Bane being the sneaky devil that he is, was getting private lightsaber lessons from, of course, Kassim, the Battle Master. And neither of those two knew that he was doing that. She was secretly teaching him. She was getting stuff from him. He's learning lightsaber secret techniques from Kassim. And he started to develop feelings for her. She started developing feelings for him. He didn't want to admit it. She didn't want to admit that she felt the same. So they kind of had this relationship. And so he started honing his Force powers, his lightsaber combat techniques, and he just continued to pour through the archives, learning more and more and more. He always wanted to learn more. It just, something was bugging him, and he wanted to figure out what it was. Now, at this time, after he'd studied for a long time with all this stuff, he challenged a student there named Strack, who he had lost to before, just like previously. And he defeated him. And he defeated him easily. And from this, he was presented with a lightsaber from the Battle Master Kassim, and it was a curved lightsaber. And Kassim said that this had once belonged to his Lord had once belonged to a famous Lord Sith named Nas, and he had taken it from his master. And it was a lesson that Bane would learn, that Kasim said that this was in honor of his master, that he had killed him and taken his lightsaber, and now that he was giving it to Bane to move forward using. So this is how Bane gets his lightsaber. So after these events, then Master Cordis, his master, learns that he's being taught by Githany secret force techniques, and that he still wouldn't stop studying the archives, even though he had told him to stop doing that. And he basically said, you can't learn from Githany anymore, and you can't go to the damn archives. I've had enough. Focus on the other stuff. And Bane's it just pissed him off, and he said, all right, I've had enough of this crap. And so he leaves the academy and goes to the Valley of the Dark on Korriban, thinking that he could find something there. He's not finding anything else in the archives, so he wants to see if he can find something there. Except he gets nothing. He gets no spirits, no revelation. He doesn't find anything. And he finally concludes that the Brotherhood is definitely not worthy of being Sith. And he decides at that point that he's going to do something about it. And that the Sith to survive, he was going to have to step in. For the good of the Order, that was more important than anything else. So he had spent like 3 weeks doing that. So he's basically starved nearly to death. He's basically exhausted. He gets back to the academy, and Githany comes up and tells him that, hey, everyone's got the Darth title, but we're going to the planet of Rusan to fight the big battle with the Jedi. And so everybody's getting the title of Darth now. She also said she has other news from him, and she's going to take him to the archives. And so when he gets the archives, lo and behold, it's a trap. Sarek is there with two other Sith, and Sarek is going to try to kill Bane. Don't know why. Maybe it's because we'll learn a little bit. But he tries to kill her, thinking that Githany's on his side. She betrays Sarek. She throws Bane, gives Bane his lightsaber, and the two fight them. She takes care of the other two Sith, and Bane overpowers Sarek, and Sarek says spare him, and he does, and he basically fully embraces the dark side, lops off his head, and he fully accepts the dark side back into his life. With that, he denounces the Brotherhood for good. He's just had enough of this. So he takes on the mantle of Darth finally. He then goes to his two masters and tells them that he's leaving. He calls them cowards. He calls them pretenders, that they are fake, and that he is leaving and going on his own journey. And he takes one of their ships and he's sent on his journey to the dark side. So he goes into the unknown regions. He starts looking for knowledge. He learns about a temple called the Temple of Ancients on Lahan. And he was able to find. So he goes there and search. He has this connection to the dark side. That's kind of where he needs to go. He gets information. That's where he, from his reading and other stuff, that this might be a place to go. So he goes there. He's not able to find any relics. He goes through. He searches. He feels his sense of the dark side way stronger in there. I mean, it's funny. He overpowers a Rancor, if you can believe that, and makes it his riding pet, and goes searching to there and looking through there, but he doesn't really find anything, but he's feeling the strong connection. And he looks further into the temple, and he starts feeling this pull, and he eventually leads him to finding a holocron of none other than Darth Revan. And if you don't know who Darth Revan is, please look him up. He's one of the most powerful Sith that ever existed, one of the most powerful Force users ever, and Darth Revan is a name that's very synonymous with Star Wars. This holocron basically turns Bane's world upside down. He learns more from this holocron than he had ever learned being on Korriban. Revan reveals to him things that he had never thought of, teaches him things he had never thought about even learning. It gives him all this knowledge that he had been craving, and he really decides that not only does he need to do something about the Brotherhood at this point, that he needs to destroy the Brotherhood, and something needs to be done so that he can conquer and destroy the Jedi. So the Brotherhood's got to go along with the Jedi, but first I got to handle the Brotherhood. And he learns all this from Darth Revan. I mean, this information just soaks into him. While he's there, Githany has a vision of Bane at this location. Now, Khan, who's the leader of the Brotherhood, is getting fearful of Bane. Bane's becoming a problem. So he's like, I got to do something about this dude. So he sends Kasim to kill Bane, And so through Githany's vision in the Force, he confronts Bane at the temple, and they have a fight. Now, initially, Bane, who's gotten much stronger on the dark side and is a pretty damn good lightsaber combatant, is fighting Kasim and is overpowering him until Kasim does something. He breaks off his double-bladed lightsaber into two lightsabers. Bane had never seen this before, had been kind of frowned upon using. He had never seen the technique, and Kasim starts using that to kind of push Bane back. Bane, however, knows this. He's been there for a couple weeks. He knows the terrain. He lures Kasim into an area of the temple, and he uses the temple to bring down the temple around Kasim and kill him. He then sends a message back to Khan, letting him know that Kasim's died, and he gives him the idea that he has learned something that's called a thought bomb. It starts implanting this in his mind that he's going to use against Khan later on, and that he had learned this from a holocron, and that, that was the case. And then he goes back. There's a few other things that happen, but Bane comes back. When he gets there, Githany, again, he has a meeting with her. She runs up, embraces him, kisses him, trying to welcome back to the Brotherhood. Unfortunately, he knew that she was up to no good. He thought she was trying to poison him with her first initial kiss, but it wasn't. It was the second tier poison. That's how much Githany was trying to do, and poison him. Now he uses the dark side of the Force to hold this off, and uses his anger and his rage to hold him basically together and keep the poison from killing him. And then he finds, this is on Rusan. On Rusan, basically it's a stalemate. The Jedi and the Sith are basically stalemate on this planet. He finds a Jedi healer there named Caleb, and Caleb wasn't going to heal him until he forced him to, saying, I know your daughter's here, and she was, and if you don't, I'll go kill your daughter. And so Caleb acquiesces, and he basically cures Bane of the poison. Then Bane, at this point, knows Githany is not with him. He thought maybe he could be her apprentice, but she's all in on the Khan bandwagon, and he's done with her. So after this, he goes to where all the Sith are. He announces his presence, and then goes and just mocks the hell out of them. He, again, calling them cowards, unworthy of the title. And he says, I have a plan that'll help you defeat the Jedi. I have this new Force technique. Let's use it. And he explains it's going to be a dark side ritual, and that they have to channel all their power through him. They agree. He takes them to the front lines of the battle on the top of this mountainside. They use this technique called Force Wave. It goes forward. It starts burning everything in sight, including some of the Jedi. The Jedi are forced back out of the Force near their base camp where they had been pushing the Sith back, and they're pushed all the way out to the plains where the fire can't get to them. And Bane's ready to finish them off, but Khan stops him and says, look, we'll go finish them off by, normal means, conventional means. And he's like, we'll go on some speeders and go take care of it. This pisses Bane off. He's like, nah, I'm really done with you guys. So while they go to do that, Githany's trying to play it off on Bane, like, it'd be more fun if we do it up close. And again, Bane's not hearing her anymore. He's basically blocked her from his thoughts. She is no longer with him, and he's no longer with her. And this is where he hatches his plan. So from there, this is where you get to the whole thought bomb process. So before then, Bane's former master that he looked at tries to convince him that he wants to be on his side, and try to persuade him to let him join Bane, that he would be the one that ruled the Sith. And Bane's like not having anything of it, and basically kills him immediately. He then goes and tells the Sith fleet, which had basically been encircled around the planet, keeping the Jedi from being able to get reinforcements in, to attack. Now, Bane knows by doing this that, they'll take out a lot of the Jedi, but it'll allow Jedi and reinforcements to get through. And so he wants this to happen. He wants the Jedi to get reinforced because he knows Khan's going after them. So the Jedi are able to get through. They get down to the planet. They push back Khan as they get closer to finish off the Jedi. All of a sudden, by the time they get there, they can see the reinforcements are landing. The Jedi push them back, and now they are on the back foot. Khan goes back to the camp. Bane tells him he told him to do it, that and that his only real weapon, he's like, you need to use a thought bomb that I told you about. Khan, thinking that he's pretty clever, thinks he mind tricks Bane, I'm sorry, not Kane, Bane into staying there. Bane plays along. I mean, Bane's playing him beautifully, and he thinks he's got this new power that he's going to defeat the Jedi. So he lures them to a tactical position where there's this giant cave. The Jedi and the Republic forces go in there. Now, they set off the thought bomb, but what Bane didn't tell them is that it'll kill everybody, not just the enemies, but everyone. So all the Jedi and the Sith that get involved in that battle die. And so Bane senses it, knows it happens, and knows that his plan has succeeded. So, because Khan thought he would use his thought bomb, kill the Jedi, he thought he had control of Bane, and then he would come back with the Sith, kill Bane, and be done with this what he looked as a fool, but Bane turned the tide on him. So, and he'd used his little subtle force mind tricks on Khan, thinking this is his idea, it would be a great idea. So he'd been planting the seed, and he finally got it to fruition. And it backfired. Khan was destroyed. The whole Brotherhood was destroyed. And the Jedi that survive think that the Sith have been extinguished, that they no longer exist. They've won. Not only have they won the war, but they defeated the Sith no longer exist. Now, Bane, having executed his plan, knows that he needs an apprentice. He had been thinking Gathani would be his apprentice, but that did not work out. And so he goes looking for one. He does come across a young girl named Zana. And Zana, he immediately feels her anger in the Force, and that she has been kind of surviving on her own. She'd been brought there by the Jedi, and kind of on her own. She had been being protected by a bouncer there. I think her name was Law. However, 2 Jedi ended up killing Law, and this caused Zana to just destroy the 2 Jedi in anger through the dark side. And he could sense that in her, and when he confronts her, she doesn't back down to him. He's like, "You'll do. Nice. You'll be my apprentice." At this time, too, she runs into her cousin. He's going to play a little part of this, Devoreit, or Davoreit, so Devoreit. And they have a little bit of a confrontation, but it just, I think, kind of introducing the cousin. She shows more of her force power, and but he comes back in a little bit later. I don't really want to cover Devoreit. He's not that important. So after the battle, he's got Zana with him, and they go through the camp, through the wreckage, looking for things, and they find a couple things. One, he finds a manuscript that was held by his foreign master Quartus from the Dark Lord, one of the most famous Dark Lords, Freedon Nod, with a location of his burial ground and some other stuff. And then he also finds a book with all these account numbers in it, and he's able to figure out that these are account numbers that hold all the wealth that Quartus had been hoarding, and it's a vast sum of wealth. So he takes that. He takes the manuscript, the thing with Freedon Nod, which says his location, and it's there. He learns that the location is on the moon of Dexon, and from there he tells Zana, "Meet me on Onderon in 2 weeks. I'll meet you there." And he's kind of seeing if she can survive on her own. Again, he's building up this new philosophy of the rule of 2, making her stronger. Says, "I'm testing you. See you in 2 weeks." So she goes on her way, and then he heads to this moon. Now, on his way there, he's haunted by... Basically, Quartus is one that's haunted him the most. He appears and starts arguing with him constantly, will not give him a moment's time. This goes on for days until the last Bane just has enough, and through the Force and anger, he just unleashes this bomb, this anger, this dark side energy, drives Quartus away, but it causes damage to his ship, so he ends up crashing on the moon. And when he gets there again, Quartus is still there, constantly, teasing him and mocking him. However, Khan's there. Khan doesn't say anything and kind of leads him to where Freedon Nod is. When he gets there, he comes into the chamber that Freedon Nod's in. He can sense the holocrons there. As he goes for the holocron, though, he is attacked by these beetle creatures that he cannot stop. And this is where he gets his armor that he's famous. The images you've seen, these are called Orbalisk. He doesn't know what they're doing initially, but he knows that when they attach to him all over, these beetle creatures, and they form kind of like this, if you've seen the image of him, he's got this shell armor, and he doesn't know what's happening at first, but he survives. It makes him stronger in the dark side. He doesn't know initially why, but he's able to get the holocron. When he gets the holocron, again, he learns more dark side rituals and power and things, and also learn about what these creatures are. And he learns that the armor that these beetles represent is that they do a couple things. the armor that they put around him make him basically impenetrable. It will even reject lightsabers. And that they also have a symbiotic relationship with him. They inject chemicals with him that can boost his prowess and power and paddle. It gives him a deeper, because of the pain he's feeling, it boosts his power on the dark side. And so he spends a couple days learning about this. Gets off planet. He goes up and meets with Zana on Alderaan, and he now, with all this done, begins teaching her about the rule of two. And he does this for the next 10 years. They have vast wealth, and so they start using that wealth to create a spy network. And he wants to get information about the Republic, and he wants to get information about Sith relics and things of that nature. He starts teaching Zana his new philosophy of the Rule of Two, about the Sith Code, as well as dark side sorcery, dark side techniques. He also teaches her about his philosophy that there should be two, the master that has the power and the apprentice that craves it. He also teaches her about long-term planning, secrecy, stealth, and that the way the Sith will rule and take over is not through vast numbers, but by secrecy and working in the shadows and then revealing themselves when the time is right. So he's teaching her all this stuff. And then while he's teaching her in these 10 years, he sends her on missions that she would use with her spy network. She would go and test the Republic and see how they're doing. She would create little pockets of disturbance just to keep the Republic on their toes and see how they react and how that's going on. But she always was taught to make sure that no matter what she does, that those that are involved die, leave no trace. So even if the Republic, if they win, they still lose, because she's not going to leave any traces of this happen. It's more of just testing the Republic, using people's wants against the Republic against them, and then betraying them and having them wiped out. So she does this on several occasions to kind of learn how should you do this in the future. Again, teaching this new rule of how the Sith are going to survive and move on. Now, the next big thing we get into the Battle Typhon. So this is roughly in the year 990 BBY. There's some stuff that happens, but you learn that there's an ancient Sith buried there, and that his holocron's there. And the one thing this is important, that is a holocron that teaches you how to make holocron. Bane had attempted to do a couple of holocrons that had failed, so this is something he really wanted to get his hands on. So while he's doing that, he has two things he wants to get done. He wants to find the holocron, and he sends Zana ahead of time to go to the Jedi Temple to basically learn if there's any way to remove this the armor, the creatures on him, and the Orbalisk. And he wants to, because he feels like it's holding him back. As much as it provides, it also is holding him back from the dark side. And he wants to see if there's a way to remove it. And so she goes there, she infiltrates the Jedi. But while they're in the archives, lo and behold, her cousin shows up again. Portrays her to the Jedi, tells them that she's who she is, and they start chasing her. And she gets away with him. And she ends up taking him to Typhon, where Bane is, bringing the Jedi after them. So they flee there. They know that they get ready for battle. So they prepare for battle in the temple. They're on their home ground, and the battle was epic. There's a great scene that's drawn of it I saw online. It's really, really good. The Sith proved too much. They're in their element. Bane was just a monster. Zana is incredibly good at lightsaber combat, and the battle basically goes the Sith way. It comes down to one Jedi left over, and Bane, being a little arrogant, uses Force lightning against him to kill him. He uses his, just fully embracing the dark side, unleashes this lightning, but the Jedi uses a Force reflection and reflects it back at him, and it hits him, and he's used his full force of his lightning, and it hits him, burns the armor, and he's starting to die because the poison there is starting to work against him. And so Zana able to pull him out of there. They escape. The Jedi he's the last one. He's in no mood to fight them anymore. So she takes him on the ship with her cousin. They go fine, and she knows about that healer that he had run into before. Now the healer's name is Caleb, and that was the one where Bane had initially threatened his daughter. And so she goes there. He's not going to help her this time. His daughter's not there this time. He can't threaten her. And so Zana pretends that she will surrender. She even sends a message, not in her own voice, but just sends a message to the Jedi, letting them know that the Sith there and they're going to surrender. And Caleb agrees to heal Bane. He not only heals Bane fully, but he heals him to the point that the armor's off, the poison's out of him, so he's been freed from the Orbilis. When he wakes up, Zana lets him know what she's done. He's pissed off at her that she's done this. He said, just kill me now. I'm not going to be the prisoner of the Jedi. And she's like, just watch. She then kills Caleb immediately. Thanks for healing my master of death. And then drives her cousin insane. Drives him mad. Using the dark side. And then hides her and Bane at the location where Caleb's at. The Jedi arrive, and when they arrive to take these two into custody, they find Caleb dead, and then they find her cousin, with who she's got given a lightsaber, who attacks the Jedi. They think he's the Mad Sith, and they kill him, and they think they've ended the Sith threat again. So she uses her cunning to think the Jedi that they've been killed, and Caleb's like, and Bane's like, okay, very nice. So for another 10 years after this, so we're getting into the final stages by the year 980 BBY. They've relocated again to Citric 4, where they have vast wealth. They've increased in their wealth. They own a large mansion there. They continue to train and build their spy network. They continue to train and learn more stuff on the dark side. However, at this point, Bane's getting up in years, and he's starting to worry about his apprentice. She's not showing any hunger or any need to try to take Bane's power. And this causes a problem because the Rule 2 says there's always be a Sith apprentice craving the power, that she will learn everything she can to try to kill Bane, take over, thus encouraging the might of the Sith. And he's not seeing that out there. It's like she's waiting for him to die, and then she'll just take over. And that kind of defeats the rule of the Sith. So when she thinks she's as strong as she can, she needs to confront him. She's not doing that. So he's thinking, I got to do something about this. If she's not going to do that, then I've got to figure a way to live longer or do something. He learns from a connection he has through his spy network, and he's also at this time constantly trading the black market. He sets himself up as an alternative disguise as someone else. He's buying a lot of Sith artifacts, relics, things of that nature. He gets in contact with one of his connections, who tells him about a manuscript of Andedu, and I can't even say this word, Andedui, I'm not even going to say it, Andedu, which was a Sith Lord, and he was on the planet of Praklith. That there was information there that would give the knowledge of immortality. He doesn't want Xana to know about this, so he sends her on her own mission, and he goes to this planet. There's a dark side cultist that protect this holocron. He easily gets through them, and he finds this holocron. The holocron, the person there, Andedu, does not want to give it up. He basically overpowers the holocron, and he learns about the technique that you can transfer through the dark side, your spirit, and overpower the spirit and will of another person and take over their body. And it's a contested will. It's dangerous because if you lose, then you are gone. But if you win, you get a new body. So he learns that, and he's thinking, this is my path forward. So he gets back home. Xana's not got back yet. And when he gets there, he's attacked by a group of Akachi soldiers and assassins. And although he's able to kill quite a lot of them, he's stabbed in the process with a blade that has a neurotoxin on it. It basically renders him unconscious for a moment. They capture him, and they take him prisoner. He's then brought to Princess Serra, Serra, and unbeknownst to Bane, this is the daughter of the Jedi that had been killed by Xana, that had healed him previously, and she thought Bane had done it, and she wanted to make him suffer. And she had hired the Akachi soldiers, assassins, to basically capture Bane and bring him to her. Sorry. And so he does. And so she takes him down to the prison on her at her location, and she starts to immediately torture him. Now, she's torturing him, and she's thinking that she's going to make him beg for forgiveness and all that other stuff, and that doesn't. It actually works against her, because Bane is used to pain, and it makes him stronger. On top of that, he's feeding from her anger and pain and frustration, which makes him stronger. And he mocks her, tells her father was weak, And this goes on for a long time, and she gets fed up and says, okay, I'll be back again. So she basically drugs him, but she tortures him for hours, and it doesn't work, and just infuriates her, makes her torture him more. Again, this cycle where it's just eventually she just gets tired and wears out. Unbeknownst to the princess, though, is that one of the guards there, her name was Lucia, had served with Bane in the war with the Brotherhood of Darkness and the Gloomstalker, and she had known him as Dessel, or as Dessel, and knew him as Des, and she was appalled by what the princess was doing. She didn't know he was now Darth Bane and that he was the Dark Lord of the Sith. She just knew that this is a buddy, this is a brother in arms. I fought in this guy in combat, and what she's doing to him is inhuman. I'm going to do something about this. So she sneaks in, administers the antidote, and then takes off. And Bane wakes up. He forgets his faculties. He gets his strength back. Now that he's got the antitoxin. And then he starts busting through. He escapes his cell, kills a bunch of guards. At the time, he starts to sense Xana's presence, and he also started to sense that she was there to kill him. That her intention was to take his title. And apparently she had learned that what he had done and what knowledge he had tried to acquire while she was away. And she said, all right. And so she had come there to kill him for it. Now, as he's escaping, he runs into Lucia again, and she begs for him not to go kill Sarah and to let her live. And it caused him a hesitation a moment, but he viewed this as weakness, and through this, he overcomes it and is going to kill Lucia. Right when he gets ready to, Xana shows up, kills her, and then these two have a confrontation through words. Initially, that Xana says, you're weak, you're trying to keep things from me, you're trying to live longer, that's not what you talk about the rule of two. And he's like, you're not ready yet, you haven't learned enough, you're not aggressive enough, and you're not ready to take on the mantle. And so she comes at him with a lightsaber. Now, Bane does not have his lightsaber at the time, but he's able to use the Force to hold her off. Luckily for Bane, what happens next saves his ass, because he was only able to keep her at bay. Eventually, though, with not having a lightsaber, he knew that he was in a no-win situation. But Sarah, at the time, trying to escape, sets off the alarm, sets off the self-destruct for the prison, trying to kill Bane. It causes a distraction. Things start crumbling. He uses the ceiling to drop it on Xana. She's able to fly back and get away from it, and he's able to escape to the hangar. When he gets to the hangar, he runs into one of the Akochi, and he's getting ready to kill her, but then she bows, and then she presents to him his lightsaber. Said that she had felt his presence in the Force, as she had been using that to find him and how she found him initially, and that she'd had a vision of this meeting. And she was going to use her knowledge that she would help him find Sarah. And so she explains her whole vision, that where Sarah is. So they get in her ship, and they head to where Sarah was on Mbia, and confront Sarah, who tries to say, look, stop doing this, come to the light side, blah, blah, blah. Before Bane can do anything, the Akochi just kills her flat out. And Bane, who could already sense the Force in her, especially the dark side, he's going to get a new apprentice, and he names her Darth Cognis. And so he's now like, okay, I'm done with Xana. I'm going to train Cognis. I sense more of what I want from her than I would with Xana. And he says, but I got to deal with Xana. So he sends Xana a message to where he is, and they're going to have a final confrontation. Now, eventually Xana arrives, and he tells Cognis not to interfere no matter what. He orders her to stay out of the fight. So they drew lightsabers. Xana arrives, they draw lightsabers, and they have a battle. And it's an epic battle. Back and forth, they fought, and it was basically a duel to the death. This was to the death. They both knew it. So they were holding nothing back. Bane is eventually able to force Xana back. Xana starts she's stronger with Sith sorcery. She starts to use her Sith sorcery to try to drive Bane back into his mind. Bane pushes back, and they just keep going back and forth using the Force, back and forth on one another. And then Xana, who's on the back foot a little bit, she's on the ropes. She releases her ace up her sleeve, and you see these it's described as dark tendrils come out of her. The tendrils hit Bane, and start to dissolve him in the dark side. He then unleashes his new ability to take over her will. And so they had this epic battle of their spirits fighting one another, knowing that whoever loses would go to the void of the dark side. And this goes on for what seems like forever. And it's a testament of will. And Xana triumphs. She defeats Bane. And after that, she makes Cognis her apprentice. And the whole idea of the Rule 2 takes place. And the new way of the Sith began all the way up to Palpatine. And this is why it works the way that it does. And that's kind of the initial story of Darth Bane. Let's get into some of his abilities and some things of note. To say Darth Bane was a badass is an understatement. Of course, we do know about the dual lightsaber he used. He used the curved lightsaber. It was red blade. It had a red blade, like all Sith have. That he got, remember, from Kazing. And he was a master in pretty much most of the forms of lightsaber. He had changed his form basically where he was at. When he got his armor, one thing he did study and use was the style of Gemso or Djemso, and he used his physical strength to basically just beat his opponents down, and because he could take hits. And you can see that in the Battle Typhon, when he was beating the crap out of the Jedi, they would hit him and they couldn't do anything, and he would allow that because his hits were so brutal that he was basically just incredibly badass with that. He also was skilled in Zuretsu. He was also, which was Form 3. He also taught this to Xana. He also eventually would get proficient in Geo, which utilized his speed. So he was an incredible lightsaber duelist. And based off, he was able to adapt to through what he had available to him. And that's his kind of style. And you can see as many people as he killed. He even had, I think I read that he utilized the Dunmok technique, that he could use to basically demoralize your opponents and stuff. So those are some of the style lightsaber he did, the curved lightsaber, and the different forms. He could basically do it all. I mean, he was that damn good. And because he was just so big and tall and strong and powerful, he just had such an advantage. And he would use the Force in a lot of ways. Now, he was very talented with the Force. This is seeing that he could use the dark side to do what he did. You saw all the things that he did when he was in the academy. He learned fast. He could use the Sith lightning to such effect that he could kill people just from the contact. That's why when he got it pushed back on him, it almost killed him, because it was that strong. I mean, he would basically, when people got hit by it, their bodies were basically turned to cinders. That's how strong his Force lightning was. He had vast. The reason he knew so much about the Force, the holocrons, the scrolls, the books, the texts, the knowledge he had gotten. So he knew all these different techniques. And he had learned all this stuff from 4 legendary Sith: Darth Revan, Freedon Nan, Darzo, and Dedu. I can't say that name. I don't know why. And he learned so much about them. He learned that that's where he got the thought bomb. He learned about Sith sorcery. He learned about creating holocrons. He learned all these different things in the Force. He adapted his style more when he had the Orbitalist clad armor. So for a while he fought differently when he had that. But one thing that he did, regardless of whether he had the armor or he did not, he could use the Force to augment his physical prowess. But he also had an exceptional tolerance to pain, which is shown again and again and again. The Aubers just amplified that. But one thing he could do is, even without the armor, he could take a hit and just keep on going. He could overcome the pain. The pain just drove him into, rage that would just fuel his dark side, and he could just channel to heal himself. You saw he kept the poison from him. He can even use the pain and anguish of others to fuel his dark side power that could invigorate him, that could sustain him, to heal him. But he was pretty much, when it came to the dark side, a master of so many things. You can see he had learned so much. His craving for knowledge led him to do pretty much anything he wanted. The only thing he hadn't learned about was what Zana had done, and that was her ace up. That was her kind of her ace up the sleeve, as I said. That he had learned all this stuff except that she had learned that from somewhere. He never knew how, because she used it against him at the end, and he thought he was a little overconfident, cocky, which led to his demise. That he thought he was powerful enough to overcome Zana. He was not. She proved to be the stronger will, and even though he lost, you can't. Bane's legacy is a rule of two, but you also see from Bane just his mind and how it works. Exceptionally intelligent, exceptionally tactical. He was a master strategist, and he thought long term. And his development of the Sith, of taking the Sith philosophy and then turning to the rule of two, was genius. He took everything that he had learned from history of all the Sith, all their secrets, saw what was happening with the Brotherhood, and knew that there was a new way that had to be done. And because he did that, these teachings would go on through the years, just from Sith to Sith, until it all culminated to Palpatine, who took all this stuff and used it to what he had envisioned, destroying the Jedi. So, in a sense, Bane succeeds when Palpatine succeeds. He is a culmination of everything that he had wanted to happen. The Rule 2 was his long-term thing, and he always thought long-term. So, there you go. That is Darth Bane. There is more there. I mean, you can read little things. I didn't cover all of it. I never do. This is just the big things. I really wanted to get into this legend stuff because it's really, really cool. And I wanted to break down this character a little bit more than I normally do with these characters, because not many people know about Darth Bane. If you haven't, I encourage you to read the books. The books are phenomenal. So good. They come from 3 novels, I believe, and I can't think of the names of them off the top of my head. I'm actually looking for them as I'm doing this, like, hell, what are the name of those books? God dang it, I should have written that down, but I didn't. So if you get a chance, just look them up. They're a great series of books, and there's some comics, there's some other things, that are out there. So yeah, if you haven't had a chance, please go check those out. So thank you guys for checking this out. If you like this, I said leave comments, subscribe, all that good stuff. And on behalf of myself and the crew, thanks for stopping in, and we'll see you for the next lore video.